Clinton.
And this is BlackLantic.
Special edition.
Recap episode of season 1.
So, welcome to the season recap of...
I also wanted to pause to say, oh, look, we're side by side in one space. Which is also why we get to do this recap episode and make it super special because we are together. Together.
Yes, so I was putting my phone on silent so that I could say that after 30 episodes of what we think, and I think a good amount of our guests think was a really cool season 1, we're going to wrap it up and focus on season 2, coming back with, more improved websites, better viewership, and better, I don't know, you pick. Season 2 is going to be the bomb. But we're still going to be posting regularly on our social media channels. We're going to be getting blogs out there, more blogs than you've seen the past few months. And I'm really excited to get into it because we're going to do we spent the past couple of days doing a recap of everything all the guests we've interviewed, what we talked about, the topic episodes, and it's been an exciting past 7 months. Hillary?
What I would have added, but I'll add and say, is that I think we wanted to make this more visually appealing. We also want more guests. We want to take the time to get feedback from the people who've been on the show before about what they liked so that we can continue to make content that people enjoy. If you're one of the many people who've started following towards the end of those 30 episodes, we really want to encourage you through this episode to go and listen to all the other ones. You can hear how our intro has progressed, how our interview style has changed. We try to be, I think, more engaging and dynamic now, and some of the earlier ones sound a bit more scripted, but that's how things progress and change. So yeah, we just want to highlight all of the cool guests that we've had, like 14 or 15, and then 18?
I think. We'll find out as we go.
We're going to find out, but like so many different topics. Like when we started this, it was Black History Month, and there was the Freedom Convoy. And this weekend we saw still some of the Freedom Convoy come rolling through Toronto because that hasn't changed. But yeah, a lot has gone down this year.
And I just want to say we are grateful and thankful that it seems that every week as we do this, we do have more and more people coming on board and listening. And we think there's a lot of great content from the beginning of our season and early on that if you're really interested in what we do, you should go back and check that out as well.
Yeah.
Are we sharing screens now?
We are.
Let's go through the recap. So do you want to, we started off season 1, episode 1 on February 1st of 2022, which was also the first day of Black History Month in Canada, which was also, unfortunately, the time of the forever to be remembered Flu Trucks Clan, aka Freedom Convoy, taking place. So go ahead, Hillary.
I mean, I think I also want to acknowledge the fact that behind the scenes, we put together this concept, this idea, this podcast, and I think a record number of days. And that episode for me will always be special because I'm so happy that we're doing this together, you and I. And I think the main part of that conversation, though, that I remember was the fact that yet again, Black History Month had sort of been usurped and taken over by this very racist movement. And it was really taking some of the shine away from something that Black people look forward to often, because unfortunately, while we're Black 365 days of the year, we're not celebrated 365 days of the year. And what I remember of that time, and I don't know how much we talked about it in our conversation, but obviously the convoy had caused a lot of problems in Ottawa, and working at community health centers, I was very aware of some of the discrimination friends were facing, how some of the community health centers I worked for, how they weren't able to serve their communities, give people food, help them find shelter. And so it was really hard to, during my day-to-day life, hear the negative impacts of that while figuring out how we were going to make this podcast, and then also figuring out how we were going to be engaging with Black History Month while there was this very big dark cloud looming. And at the time, the pandemic was also in such a different place. It's been 7 months, and it does not feel like 7 months have gone by doing this podcast. But 7 months ago, during that time, we were still lockdowns and masking, and with Clinton visiting and a friend who was visiting right before, it was the first time I've gone unmasked on transit. So it's also weird to think of those things as a bookmark moment in the year.
Yeah.
What about you?
Basically, in February, it was a time when around the world, COVID mandates were being lifted, and Canada was still one of the most stringent and strictest with those regulations.
Mhm.
Now, I think it had already been said in Parliament and things like that, that Canada should very shortly start to move away from these things. However, a gentleman named Pat King, alongside some other people over on the West Coast, who is also the leader of a very racist, white supremacist political party over there in the West Coast called Wexit or something like that, trying to model the Brexit model. He's the one that organized this convoy. And I'm prefacing all this because the convoy was problematic. It was disruptive. I don't know if they broke any laws, and they probably did. They took their trucks down to Ottawa, the highway, to say, like, let's stop all these mandates. This is all ridiculous. But for a lot of people of color, it was offset by the fact that it simply was led by a white supremacist. Now, we can sympathize with people who feel like their voices haven't been heard. Hello, people of color. But all the white Canadians who felt that their voices weren't being heard regarding not wanting to get vaccines and COVID mandates and stuff like that kind of shut down the country in a lot of ways. There were shipping stoppages. Trucks couldn't get across the border. We weren't getting goods and supplies. I think pharmacies were running out of medications. And this was not even due to the pandemic. It was due to the people revolting. It was a really weird time, frustrating to say the least. But yeah, organized by a white supremacist. And if it had have been not organized by a white supremacist, I think people of color would have been able to get on board a lot better. This is not a slight against the people that went down, the people that were involved in it, but you just we can't get behind an organization that is so blatantly racist. And so that was a big problem for people of color.
Absolutely.
And that was our first episode. It had a great listenership, of course. The convoy was well in the news. And when we talk about episode 3, which I think we kind of talked about it just now, we're kind of going to go into another reason it was a problem for people of color. Episode 2, we had our first guest, who was an amazing individual, and also the gentleman who helped us come up with the name for our podcast.
Yeah, Greg Frankson, who wrote in and edited the African Anthology, who we've continued to reference several times in our Emancipation Day episode. He's the one who brought me to Whitby for my first MCing gig around the book. And yeah, he definitely helped us. He's the one who coined BlackLantic, and so that is now who we are. And yeah, in the African Anthology, Tandoi McCarthy and Gary Weeks are both featured, and then we've had Gary on, and so we'll talk about him a bit more. Tandoi we had spoken to in other endeavors and places. Had the privilege of interviewing his mom for CBC in the past, but we've yet to have him on our show proper. But also an amazing poet from Fredericton, right?
Yep.
Him and Gary from Fredericton.
Yep.
I always confuse Fredericton and St. John. I'm so sorry. I've never really spent time in either place.
We're gonna get some unfollows today.
Sorry. I confuse them, but I don't think that they're the same. I digress. First guest. And I mean, it was important to have him as a first guest because of the fact that he helped us coin that phrase, and I personally appreciated what African Anthology was ever able to do, put together so many literary influences from across our whole country, including George Eliot Clark, of course.
The legend.
The legend, the man, the myth, the legend. But put all these amazing people in a book to tell the story of what it means to be Black currently in 2022. And some of it did have the framing of the pandemic or of the past or immigration. And there's so many different avenues. And because of the Emancipation Day event I participated in, having now met 2 of the other authors in it, still would encourage so many people to go check it out. I think it's just africananthology.com or .org now, where you can buy the book, but definitely a worthy read for anyone who's just trying to explore or understand their Blackness or good allyship. It was a very good episode. Greg's a funny guy. He brought me for my first Jamaican patty.
Yes, and you loved it. And I've been trying to shove Jamaican food down Hillary's throat all week. And I haven't been able to get her to eat all the Jamaican food that we've been eating all week. Because I gotta say, during these 5 days in Toronto, I probably had Jamaican food about 5 times.
I've been for Oxtail right with you.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Hillary covered a lot of it with Greg, but all I'm going to say is he's an amazing individual, charismatic personality. The book African Anthology is an amazingly unapologetic compilation of poets and stories from across Canada, just not holding any punches, like telling their honest, raw truths to the public without any fear. And we suggest you check out the website and pick it up. It's well worth a read. You'll be very inspired and motivated and moved by the passion in these stories. So again, Greg was the editor and contributor to it. He's got a really interesting history himself. We recommend you go back. And while you're listening, like go to blacklantic.ca. Follow us on our different streaming platforms, social media sites, click subscribe, sign up to the email list so you know when new episodes drop for season 2. And yeah, let's move on to episode 3.
Episode 3, which I think is more of the convoy vibes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Episode 3 was, we went back to the convoy situation because we were getting to be through February of 2022, which is, you know, to people listening, you should know this, Black History Month. However, we found that this year, Black History Month was completely overshadowed by this effing convoy. Black February is the shortest month of the year, and you know, Hillary and I are always learning stuff on the show. We always used to complain like, why did they give us the shortest month of the year? Now we know that the Black person that founded Black History Month chose that month because of some of his mentors and his own birthday, like people, he chose it. But still, this is the one month of the year where the media actually pays any degree of attention to Black issues. And we found that in February of 2022, there was no coverage. The people's stories were not being heard, spotlights were not being done. There was not a great focus on Black Canadians because all the focus was on the convoy, and it felt really shitty and really unfair. And we just talked about how like it like kind of kiboshed, and this racist leader took over Black History Month on top of doing his convoy that was pointless, because I will say the mandates were about to be dropped anyways, and everyone had already announced this. So this was just him trying to gain political favor in the West Coast.
Absolutely. The other thing we talked about too, in terms of the title Black Lit Month, was the fact that we're continuing to try to educate and move away from only talking about Black traumas, Black sadness, grief, slavery, and start talking more about innovators, creators. And then we talked about the idea of why
Coin that term.
party, Black Lit Month,
Black History Month. It should be Black. So we are petitioning for next year. We're going to start the change.org, maybe starting in the fall, to change Black History Month to Black Lit Month. I don't think it'll I want to see how many subscribers we could get, but
we could just make it the name of the pod. Like we could do like a BlackLantic Black Lit Month special for like the 4 weeks of February and see what amazingness we can come up with, and
we'll see
what we can get people to do. But yeah, we're, I think, both just very aware that Black History Month is often, we get asked to do a lot of work. We have a spotlight on us for that 1 month, and it's actually very draining we appreciate the opportunities, but if you could spread them throughout the whole calendar, it might be beneficial to our sleep cycles. But also the fact that like, I know that
Black history is Canadian history. And you also know
that and the fact that like, I mean, I took the opportunity with CBC to highlight why talking about Black History Month sometimes can be traumatic by interviewing Stacey Darku, because of the fact that we get asked a lot about just the sad stuff, and then people talk about the N-word, and then it's like, okay, go back to being Black and ignored for the other days of the year. And so that's why we want it to be lit. It's supposed to be a party. It should be like Carabana. It really should just be winter version Carabana, where we're like twerking in snowsuits about being Black in the street. Go catch me outside in a parka, just like, hey, in February. Let's go.
That's exactly what it should be. Before we get into episode 4 and move away from Black History Month, reminded me, we also, during Black History Month of February 2022, had the opportunity to interview very influential people that we were able to do CBC segments on the radio, in which I interviewed Canadian rapper 180, who became the first New Brunswick Black New Brunswick musician in all of New Brunswick history to ever win any award in any music category, which was kind of like a bittersweet victory, because one, he's a great artist who deserves it, and that is he'll always go down as the first one to have done that. But the other question poses is, why is he the first in 2022? Like how is it, like, I'm sorry, but Black people in music go like hand in hand. And how could it be that in 2022, is it because there's no support for Black music? Black musicians are not being reached out to, or the organization themselves were not reaching out to Black musicians. Were Black people submitting their music and never winning? The point is, we got to interview hip hop artist 180. He has a really interesting story. And who did you interview?
I interviewed Stacey Darku,
Right.
which I just mentioned, but then didn't you also interview Kassim Doumbia, the first Black mayor? And so it was the double firsts.
Yeah, we both had 2 features. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so you also had to interview Kassim Doumbia, first Black mayor ever, Mayor of Chupagan at the moment.
Yeah.
And I also just did an article about him for Buy Blacks, and because of some municipal reforming, he has to run again in November, even though it's only been 1 year.
I think
he'll
he's gonna
be
take it again, and we're gonna, Kassim, you're gonna have our full support for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then now I have to try to remember the second person that I interviewed.
Stacey Darku first.
While you look it up, thank you. Stacey, she's a Black therapist counselor, who we had spoken to before on a different show. And I really liked the idea of speaking about why Black History Month can be traumatizing and exhausting for Black people, because you're reminding them of their trauma for a month, especially when we talk so infrequently about Black joy, Black success, Black innovators, Black creators, and it just becomes about like slavery, Underground Railroad, how Black people got here, and then a bunch of people being like, sorry that we're not educating you about Black history, but we're also not going to change anything or do anything different. So that was a shame. The other person I interviewed was Gary Weeks. And we then later had him on the show. So I got to speak about him and to him several times about being a Black photographer in the East Coast.
I lost the page.
No, yes, you did. No, you didn't, because it's actually right here.
All right. So, for episode 4, we interviewed Bianca Garcia.
Yeah. I say it like that because she's just so fancy and so fun and a lot of energy.
Admiration, yes.
Yes, and I have had the pleasure of hanging out with her and meeting her because of her interest in visiting Toronto and a lot of the endeavors that she works for here.
And who is she?
She's founded Black Collective Media, has helped co-founded Black Collective Media, but helped with the Black Culture Society of PEI and BIPOC USHR for some of the Black organizations that are on PEI in the island, though she is an immigrant from the Dominican Republic.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So she has immigrated to Canada, done amazing work in Prince Edward Island, very charismatic individual to listen to. She co-founded this organization, and then, like you said, she does marketing, so she's marketing savvy, and really fun to talk to and be around. She goes by Afro Latina XAF on Instagram, I believe.
Afro Latin X.
I think she might be migrating to Toronto, if I'm not incorrect. So
I believe that she is, though I don't want to spoil anyone else's stories or tell anyone else's life, but I think the goal is for her to be moving here, which is super exciting. I know that she'll be visiting soon and doing some cool work. She always has really fun content, like very fun influencer content going on all the time. And she has a lot of work too for the queer community, the Black queer community out on the island, which should be duly noted. But great person. And yeah, if you follow her, Afro Latin X AF, if you follow her soon after this episode drops, I think you'll be able to follow along what she's doing for Black women in TV for TIFF, which is a very interesting little organization and endeavor. I'm recording. The next episode we did was, I think, for me, just like a pile of like crap. But basically, the episode 5 is about Blaine Higgs's government saying that there was no mystery illness in terms of the weird symptoms that people were having that was causing memory loss and muscle ataxia that a lot of people felt was caused by something that the Irvings were putting in the water or nature or whatever. The fact that they were lifting the rest of the mandates for the province in regards to COVID. And then also the fact that Manju Varma, Commissioner for Systemic Racism, was essentially saying that she did not have the time to go through and answer individuals' complaints on racism, and that wouldn't be able to be in her report Which, I mean,
Well, I
fast
mean, I wonder
forward.
why, because they posted the job. They didn't
Not
hire
this again.
anyone. It took 3 months to hire anyone, I believe. And when they finally did, which gave her a shorter deadline to do the work she needed to do, and it was just ridiculous. If you want to hear more about this episode, any episode, maybe you should get out a pen and paper. Any episode you want to learn about, visit our website, blacklantic.ca, to click on it and find that content.
I also just want to say that,
Yeah.
that this was a premonition for a later episode in which somebody ends up stepping down. And so this was just a precursor to realizing that, like, this report is shenanigans, except we knew that all along.
For episode 6, we are very happy to have Bronx born, New York raised, New Brunswick immigrated, Alon McCall. Alon McCall is a producer, drummer, audio engineer, and it's not in hip hop. So Alon McCall is a very warm, loving individual who's very passionate about everything he does, and who sort of helped to shatter stereotypes in New Brunswick, because everyone who meets him naturally thinks he's a hip hop producer who loves rap, because he's a 6 foot something, very tall Black person. So it's really insightful to have him on to talk about his passions and his love and what it was like to be a Black kid growing up in the Bronx, not listening to hip hop music and stuff like that. So if you want to listen to an episode about someone who breaks stereotypes and challenges people's perceptions, is what we're always trying to do on the show, challenges people's perceptions of what it means to be Black, because it's undefinable. Tune into this show.
We also had a good conversation in there about 180 being the first Black person to get a Music New Brunswick award, and sort of some of Alon's thoughts on Music NB. Because they are some spicy thoughts. We've had several, well, we'll talk about the other guests too, but we've got a couple guests with spicy thoughts about Music NB.
Yeah.
So,
who we think can do better, and we hope that if they're listening to this, take this with the proper grains of salt.
They have shared some of our stuff before, and we're grateful to be on their radar, because we both have a very big love of music. You literally being a musician, me just being a listener of music. But yeah, Music NB. Thank you, love you. Keep having Black people as part of your awards, winning them. Yeah,
well, we're saying thank you, but let's also be clear. We're also saying do better, be more inclusive. You have reached out to us in the past to share your content and let Black people know about opportunities to submit for awards and other things, memberships. So this is not a hate and this is not a love. We're saying that it is odd that this only the first Black musician ever won. We may not have all the info there in 2022, but yeah, do better, and we think you can.
Speaking of things that should be done better, episode 7 was about the start of the Russian-Ukraine war, in which we then sort of uncovered statistics about how racist.
This is one of my favorite covers, to be honest.
I took a photo at a crypto event in the Alma combo. Yeah. You're like, can you send me this photo? Now you know what goes on behind the scenes in our conversations.
Sorry to interrupt you, go on.
No, just that we had sort of learned about the racism of both of these places. And I think I had at least expressed some concerns about a bunch of racist people immigrating here to flee the war. At the same time, happy that it seems to, we've welcomed lots of Ukrainians, and in doing so, to reflect on that, I think that it has started to break down some barriers that were unfortunately there for all of the other people who've immigrated, like fast forwarding the ability to get a driver's license if you had one in Ukraine. And a lot of people are asking the right questions about why this is allowed for them and not allowed for other people of color who have immigrated. And I'm happy that this is happening so that we can highlight that these changes need to be made across the board this many months later. Yeah. We don't need you to sit and watch the episode, but let's go watch it.
We want you to watch it, yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, the Ukraine war, similar to the Freedom Convoy food trucks clan thing, kind of highlighted a lot of things like that Hillary just mentioned, like why are refugees European countries being given different treatment, being able to have access to driver's license, hair licenses easier.
Yeah.
Their degrees and certifications are able to convert over easier to Canadian status and stuff like that. And to anyone who's ignorant, like, don't think that it's because their education is so much better than some of these other countries where refugees come from. And the other thing it highlighted was, so like the people of the Freedom Convoy and how people of color had trouble getting behind that. And we do support Ukraine, but there was this outpouring of support for Ukraine that we didn't see for Syrian refugees. And we also started to learn about these Ukrainian people we were all crying out for, about that country does have a deep-seated history of a lot of racism, a lot of neo-Nazism. There were a lot of African students that were being threatened to be shot or killed, or were not getting the same treatment as other people trying to flee the country. And then there's a history, there's like for people of color living here in the Western world and trying to, be good Canadians and being like, we support Ukraine, get out of there, Russia. It's also like, okay, we're supporting y'all, but y'all aren't supporting Black people. And I'm not talking to everyone from Ukraine, but there is, it actually turned out there was a larger percentage of people than I would have imagined that were very racist against Africans and Black people in that country.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear the other side of the story regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict that is still going on 6 months later, it's surprisingly enough, because some people thought that was going to be done in a month, and it just shows how time flies. Tune into that.
Getting increasing.
Yeah, things ain't going great for that. Oh, for some reason I thought we're going to pull up the next episode. What was the next episode?
The next episode, I believe, is with Alicia.
No, we're getting there. I think we had a back-to-back.
We did do back-to-back topic episode.
All right, so this was double the work, less journalistic representation. In this episode, we talked about there was a big outpouring of awareness being made, which led to, I think, Sandra Hannenbaum eventually, about the lack of Black representation in media. And it's because of a new report came out that sort of reinforced the sayings that Black people have been saying for generations, is that Black people need to do, and many people of other cultures and even women, need to do twice as much of the work to get even half of the recognition in society. We've always known this, but a study at that point in time had confirmed it with data and stats to prove that, Black people and everyone else can do. In this report was Black people. They work harder and they don't get the recognition. That's a form of systemic racism, keeping them behind and making them twice as exhausted, twice as work, twice as output, and still not getting the promotions and recognitions deserved.
Which does lead to Sandra Hannenbaum's twice as good media.
Yeah.
Because with the twice. But yeah, we did that episode.
This is why recaps are great. And to any of our new listeners that have been following us, the past 5-10 episodes, go back and skim through these. You can find the teasers on our social media. We are going to make them more easily accessible for people, like on Instagram and other places where you can, maybe even on the website where you can see clips from the episode and decide if you want to listen to it. Just had an idea.
And you said it out loud and I like it.
Yeah. So this is a fun recap for us as well, to be honest. And
we do them a lot and then we just sort of forget what we've done.
Well, this is recording.
Don't have that many thoughts about that specific episode, except that I think the other thing that we had talked about was I had surprised you with this news about like money that was offered to people who were going to be able to like have ideas about the downtown core. Remember, I was like, there's this surprise news and Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor had like this money thing for the Atlantic provinces to like revamp their downtown and have new events. And I'm realizing I never heard who got that money or whatever happened with that.
That was all across Canada or just New Brunswick?
Atlantic provinces.
Well, maybe we'll look into that at some point. Yeah, I think our main concern was
the recap where we do into the money.
Another big thing in journalism, I think, again, we've mentioned Sandra Hannenbaum a lot, is that, reporters are so pressed to just pump out content that important stories never do get followed up on.
Just her whole shtick.
Yeah. Okay. So for episode 9, we interviewed Alicia McManus, and Alicia McManus is originally from St. John, New Brunswick, who grew up as a Black white passing individual and had a lot of unique stories and experiences as a result of that. When you are a person with white passing skin in a room full of white people, but all your family is black, you are going to hear a lot of stuff that black people don't hear when they're in the room. So that was, you can talk a bit more about her. I'll scroll down here.
Yeah, there's
She has a lot of interest. Go ahead.
no, finish your sentence.
Nothing. That's just one aspect of the story. So that is who she is. But then in the episode, we uncovered a lot about some of her history. She's a lifestyling consultancy company. You now co-host a podcast with her called Mocktails and Melanin, which is about sober life as a person of color. And
That's not what it's about. I wouldn't define it as that. It's more so about the sober journey and the fact that it might not always be fully sober, hosted by people of color, but our guests have not always been people of color.
I don't mean guests, but I mean you don't have guests every week, do you?
Every other week, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's the goal, but
there were conversations about being a person of color. What I listened to.
We're on hiatus at the moment. We're actually going to be making our content today. When I'm recording this is when we're going to start getting back on track. But
it was a really insightful episode. We won't drop the goodies here, but I mean, if the things that she has heard, really shocking things, especially around the time of George Floyd's murder, things she's heard police officers say in rooms where they thought they were safe from black ears and things like that. Like this is a shocking episode if you not enjoy, but if you want some shock value here. This will be one to go check out episode 9.
Yeah, white parents of her friends making comments of who should date who in front of her, stuff like that. Just very surprisingly racist things for someone who's only like 10 years older than me in the same location. And of course now she's in Red Deer. So it's not better out there.
Yes.
Definitely not better out there.
Sorry, Alberta, but you are known as being New Brunswick is a close second, but you are known as being the most racist province in Canada.
Sorry about it.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Then
episode 10. Ooh, fun.
Clinton and I finally got to be together after a whole pandemonium, except it was still pandemicing. But yeah, I got to go home and visit New Brunswick, and we got to finally record at CHMA studio in person, who we always want to thank for airing our stuff every Sunday, 8 p.m. Atlantic on the radio. But yeah, I got to finally go. The goal of the trip was to be able to see my mom. And then is that the trip where I caught COVID?
Oh,
they showed up and I had COVID, or is that the one after that?
Good question.
No, that's the one who showed up and they just never opened the nursing home. So we recorded that day.
Yeah, you had to see your mom
through a window,
which sucked because COVID was so bad. Yeah, but in this episode we talked about in 2021 hate crime reports skyrocketed across the country by, I believe, a shocking number, 70% in 2020. I don't know if that meant that hate crimes increased after the Trump era. I don't know if after George Floyd's murder, more and more Canadians felt empowered and confident on how to come forward and report a hate crime, but those numbers were shocking. If you ever have been a victim of a hate crime and you want to report that, you can go on Facebook and visit a page called the Human Voice Foundation, in which the host there does lay out a complete episode and video about how to report hate crimes if you've been a victim of one. We also talked about Prince William and Princess Kate.
That horrible photo.
Go ahead, take it. Yeah, I wish we had it.
They're like shaking the hands of Jamaican kids through a wire fence, and it just screams colonizer. Yeah, the PR people, the
media photo op. Yeah, basically the royal family, who historically are very responsible for colonialism, having a bunch of black kids hiding behind fences trying to touch these divine people. So that didn't go well. And another thing we didn't follow up on, there was a new awards show coming to Toronto. I guess it was a Black Excellence Awards show. I don't know what happened with that.
I'm trying to look it up now. I'm like, what happened to this?
But again, it was very fun to be in person at the CHMA facilities in Sackville at Mount Allison University. We're really grateful for them. They plan to help us with amazing things in the future, especially during our hiatus. What do you call in between a season? anyways,
A hiatus.
during the time we are taking in between season 1 and season 2. Yeah, and it's going to be great.
Yep.
I don't think you want to look
The
it up.
Legacy Awards, was it this?
I don't
It's
know.
it's supposed to air in September, so we'll follow up when that airs.
All right. So
Man, the myth, the
we are
legend.
primarily an Atlantic-based organization, but Hillary lives in Ontario, and a lot of Ontarians kind of feel that Ontario is part of the East Coast as well. That probably stems from the idea that the East Coast of America is directly under Ontario.
North.
So this is kind of East Canada. It's definitely not considered central like the Prairie provinces, but all this to say that once in a while, you're going to be hearing interviews from guests from Ontario and Quebec and stuff like that.
Like Logic.
Okay.
Who, I mean, we also want to make sure that the guests do tie in as often as they can to something related to the East Coast. And so I had learned through meeting Logic through other business people and friends that he had done a very moving and powerful documentary on Africville when he had finally heard about it, after being moved to start the Stolen from Africa brand, which I think is going to be celebrating like its 15th year next year. So they have merch and clothes, but have started sort of a movement through the Toronto District School Board and other avenues to educate people on Black histories as an extracurricular, or as like a program that's added on to the schools without it being actually part of the curriculum. And in creating that, he connected with some people and was able to go to Nova Scotia and see Africville and make a documentary about it. And now homie's got some very cool friends like Maestro Fresh West and Drake and Julie Black, and he's a very fun, very lovely person who happy to still be connected within the city and run into, who makes like really, really great projects and a lot of good mental health supports. He also has like 4 podcasts. He's trying to be like me. I'm trying to be like him. But so definitely go check him out and check out this episode to learn more about Neil Logic Donaldson, rapper, creator, connoisseur.
I just had a throwback to how we met Neil, and it was through your friend Megan, which was interesting, which is led to the first episode of how we became BlackLantic. Hillary and I used to be in a previous podcast together.
And now we
We'll
do
save that for a
BlackLantic.
future episode of why we left the previous organization we were with. It was not due to journalistic differences of opinion on how the show should be done. Something really, really, really horrible and bad happened to us. And I don't know if we're ready to talk about that today, but we will one day. And yeah.
And thanks to Megan, now we have, and thanks to Megan, we have BlackLantic, and thanks to Greg, we are named BlackLantic.
Yeah.
And we know Logic. We now know Logic, who also works with Megan on other endeavors. It's all very connected. The world is small.
And I will say, I'm sorry to name drop here, but Maestro Fresh West, I don't know what happened, man. You're supposed to do the CBC episode with us. You said yes. We never heard from you again. Reach out to us. You're a Canadian legend, rap icon, godfather of Canadian hip hop. We'd love to have you on the show for season 2. I don't think you're going to hear this message directly in this episode.
I think that we need to reach out to him.
I'm going to drop him another line and be like, "What happened, bro?" Yeah, because Maestro Fresh is a staple.
Just text Logic and be like, "Yo, where's your boy?"
Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Maestro, like, we want you on the show still, all right? And so this was a fun episode. Episode 12 was the roast of Justin Trudeau and Kanye West. So a lot of the racist, ignorant people that troll our page, for some reason think that we're like diehard liberals that are like puppets and pawns, controlled, like almost like we're robots that are just pushing this liberal message of, what is it, like the critical
race theory
bullshit and all the things that ignorant people think about this whole, like the anti-racism and hate groups, or the racist groups that try to deny racism and stuff like that. So anyways, I really like putting out this episode because we're making fun of Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau was roasted by the world in a summit that took place where different leaders or representatives of different countries were just lambasting him. They were really criticizing him for what he did during the Freedom Convoy. And that was to freeze protesters' assets, freeze the assets, bank accounts, and funds of citizens who were supporting the convoy. Now, I believe there might have been different reasons for that. I don't like, basically, when a government organization starts
Putting their hands on
overstepping
your
their
money.
boundaries and liberals, it's not as bad as attacking your own citizens, like when China attacked its own citizens in Tiananmen Square,
Mhm.
and when riot police would attack its own citizens for protesting. It's not as bad as that, but when you're overstepping your, I think, your governmental authorities, and it's really a scary precedent for what can happen in the future. People should have the right to disagree, to protest. Part of living in a democratic society means that we can speak out against things that we don't agree with without fear of oppression. And when you go and you want everyone to go home, so you freeze their bank accounts and basically take their money that we are supposed to have safely trusted in a bank and not under our mattress and not give us access to it. I think you're overstepping boundaries. So the rest of the world really roasted Justin Trudeau for that. There were video clips on the episode that were hilarious. You should definitely check it out. So a reminder, BlackLantic.ca. If any of these episodes interest you, go back and take a listen, because I hate this. It's our work, but I'm really proud of the work we put out. We also roasted Kanye West because
I was finally able to explain to you the chokehold that the Kardashians have on the
very
world,
confusing to me. Yeah.
but then also how they have exploited Black men, while simultaneously talking about how Kanye West's antics were harmful towards like and be sort of having some violence against women rhetoric in terms of trying to like kill Skeet Pete and hold Kim hostage. And now fast forward this many months and they've broken up. And so what was it all really for? What was it for? Anyway,
What was it for, Kanye?
what was it for Pete?
Well, I know what it was for Pete.
I know what it was for Kim.
True that.
True that.
Okay. So that was it. Episode 13. I don't think we need to say much about this. This is a kind of listen to this episode.
Where are you really from?
Episode 13 was a very well listened to episode because it's a very popular topic, and like hair will continue to be. It was about the "but where are you really from" question, and the reality that a lot of the time when people of color get asked where they are from, the first answer is unacceptable to many white Canadians, and the concept that their dark melanin may have been in this country for hundreds of years, if not decades, doesn't seem to compute, because when you say you're from Moncton or you're from Toronto or you're from Calgary, that's never satisfactory. The question always becomes, no, but where are you really from? Where are your parents from?
Which is really just
listen to the episode. It's pretty
it's
self-explanatory.
just code for why are you Black? And I feel like there was a blog that accompanied this, maybe by you.
Definitely. I think the blog was beforehand. So yeah, check out our blogs as well.
Yeah.
But we also in this episode give lots of tips and tidbits for white people, because it's okay to be curious about where people are from, but we give tips and information on the proper way to eventually get that information. I'll leave it at that.
I'll leave it at that.
Check it out. Episode 14 was a very interesting person I met while I was doing an entrepreneurship panel with Tribe Network based out of Halifax, New Brunswick, where I was a panelist and just helping out. Okay, 2 seconds. Tribe Network is a not-for-profit that is helping Black entrepreneurs fulfill their dreams here in Canada through mentorship, funding, and stuff like that. I met Demi Lola, who's doing really amazing things that are similar and on par to what we were doing. She's a Nigerian immigrant who immigrated to New Brunswick, has lived in all the major cities in New Brunswick, and she wants to do what we're doing, and she does do what we're doing. She amplifies Black voices through stories. It was a really interesting episode because we learned a lot more about Nigeria, and she's just a really warm, amazing person who we can't drop her news still, but there's really cool things in the works for her as well.
She also was one of the many people who's highlighted that like I didn't realize I was Black till I got here. Another one of the people who felt that, and also had been told by someone who she was trying to help cross the street, essentially like, why are you coming here for better opportunities type of rhetoric, and that sort of bizarro, like, why are you coming here for better jobs, like why can't you sort of stay where you are energy, which we hate. That's racist. So anyway, a wonderful episode.
Check out that episode. I don't have an image for this one, a little website tweak that we have to fix. But
That's
episode
wrong.
15 was about the arrest of Daniel Barr, a person who worked for a government-funded agency in Moncton, New Brunswick, who frauded many people out of their money, as well as the organization itself, who has a really bad history with sexual assault, as well as, non-equal treatment to people of color. Check that out. We also talked about the Dave Chappelle special on Netflix. That was, I'll let you talk about that, Hillary.
Well, we talked about the fact that some man jumped on stage and hit him after this queer special had occurred, citing something along the lines of not helping. Sorry, my cat just gave the cutest yawn. Citing something about like, you didn't help my grandmother where she lived or something like that. And then I mentioned the fact that like he was doing some weird things about neighborhood infrastructure where he had put a lot of investment. But yeah, basically, after he had been slapped in the face. This was after Will Smith and Chris Rock's slap. So a lot of Black people were getting slapped during this time. There's like a lot of like fisticuffs between Black people at this juncture of the year.
And you know what? We didn't even really focus. First of all, there's Black Girl Fitness out of Nova Scotia, an amazing fitness organization of women making safe spaces for women of color to exercise. But one thing we didn't cover, and I think it was partly intentional. You wrote a blog about it, which was amazing, by the way. But we didn't do a podcast episode about the Chris Rock Will Smith thing, and I think we just felt that there was just so much about it in the media that it was just we didn't want to accentuate the Black on Black violence in the narratives, but Hillary's blog from a woman's perspective was really insightful.
I think it was, I'd like to think that my blog gave a different perspective, because I think a lot of what I was reading was women being like, if my man isn't going to defend me like that, and as someone who's a survivor of domestic violence, I don't think men should punch men over alopecia. I just don't. I think that Jada should have stood up for herself if that was a real situation. And I do believe that it seemed like there was more mental health issues going on in the background. More recently, Will Smith has apologized, but he hasn't said this phrase, "I'm sorry, Chris." It's more like, "I'm sorry that this happened." It just sounds more like, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to be allowed at the academy for a decade." So yeah, check out my blog about that. It was a weird time. We had more important and better things to say.
It was just such a media debacle. Like, as soon as there's Black on Black violence, the world is all over it for weeks, right? And whereas that's problematic in itself.
Yes.
Episode 16.
We finally got to have Gary Weeks on, who, as I mentioned earlier, we interviewed for CBC. Gary Weeks, another one of the first Black photographer to be featured at the Beaverbrook Gallery in Fredericton. He is actually from England and immigrated over to Canada, I believe for love, like most people who come to New Brunswick. But then
love family or work.
So yeah, love family or work. So yeah, he does photography there. He's done the cover for Africa Anthology. Wonderful guy, super sweet. I think after the episode, him and I stayed on and talked for like an hour. He's just a wonderful person doing a lot of great work out there. And had his stuff at the gallery at the same time as our friend of the show, Meredith Batt. But yeah, great conversation all around about photography, how his Blackness encourages his work, what he looks for, what his inspirations are. So go back and listen to that episode, and then go check out Gary's work. It's sick.
His upbringing in London and stuff like that in comparison to over here in Canada and in the States. A lot of our guests have had a lot of interesting comparisons from living in the States and Canada and other countries as well, just to throw that in there. And he's just a really warm guy. If you just want to watch an episode that, puts a smile on your face just from just listening to it, like I think it was a really, like you said, you stayed on and talked to him for an hour afterwards because he was so conversational that
and we've since had another photographer on, so you could also see how they both do their works differently and compare them, because it's interesting to have two people with the same medium of work on the same podcast.
So other big news during our 7 months of doing this, this episode 17th, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The main feature of this was something that in the media did not get anywhere near as much attention as Chris Rock and Will Smith, was the mass shooting in Buffalo, in which a radicalized white supremacist,
18-year-old?
18-year-old, I believe, was so influenced by the negative perceptions of what he was taught by hateful people
Mhm.
that he spent months planning meticulously, scouting out an area, and then carrying out a violent mass shooting attack against a number of Black people in a supermarket in Buffalo. Painful time in history. And again, just as we recap over, I can't believe we've been doing this for 7 months already.
I know.
A really big issue that sparked conversation again in Canada and America about these kinds of issues. We know nothing's going to change in America anytime soon, but
It's conversation around that, and also the fact that yet again this is another person who was being painted in a kind light through the media, like focusing on,
mm,
I think, video games and what had influenced him, and the fact that he was like a younger person and not just being like, this is a white terrorist. Like,
yeah,
a lot of the language is still very kind and gentle around white boys and men who perform and do these atrocities. And so I know that we had talked about that as well.
also, it highlighted in America the Republicans' ridiculous lines of defenses about how, that was a school shooting. Sorry, there was also a school shooting, but instead of gun control, they were talking about, schools should only have one entrance, or
Oh yeah,
security guards, or this, that, or the other. Like
all of
everything
those
except for gun
things.
control, when at the same time it led Canada to tighten its gun control, whereas America stayed the same. We also highlighted positive events like funding in, I believe, Nova Scotia for young,
There was the black,
to encourage STEM programs and stuff
yes,
like
for
that.
BlackLantic.
Prince Charles and Camilla visiting Canada, which is
Cool.
not as bad of a photo op as Charles and Kate
Certainly
down in
not as
Jamaica.
bad of a photo op, and I think was like both of those visits seem to just be slowly working its way towards the Pope coming here, which
Yeah.
we did we talk about
I think we did at some point, but the
that?
Justin Burke thing, intertwined with some Nova Scotia news at that time, was that there was in Nova Scotia, there was a clubhouse that was called the Redneck Hangout that had a picture of a noose, which we all know was probably depicting the encouragement of
Mhm.
killing Black people. Some people might think things like this are a joke or not as dangerous, but it really is, because it shows that this kind of radicalization, and anyone listening to this now is probably well aware of the L'Acadie Nouvelle racist caricature of Muslim people that was posted recently. You can easily think this stuff is innocent, but the proper combination of these things over the proper period of time are the things that lead to radicalized young people taking out mass acts of violence against people of color.
There is a blog
So
about that Clinton wrote as well about the L'Acadie Nouvelle thing. You also mentioned very briefly Justin Burke, but we weren't talking about him.
I'm so sorry.
But
Justin
we
Burke.
did end up talking
Obviously, I
about him
wasn't
in
talking
another
about Justin
episode.
Burke. I was talking about this. I don't know what the
But
kid's name is. I don't.
we don't need
He's
to
not
know his
important
name.
to us. Yeah, I was talking about the 18-year-old that murdered
Yeah,
meticulously
those
a number
few
of Black
people.
people in a supermarket in Buffalo.
But we
Yeah.
do have it. We will talk about Justin Burke later because we did talk about his the like not loosening of
Oh,
parole,
yes,
but he does
yes.
come up, so you're not far off.
Okay.
He's just not yet.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for the recap, and then we'll talk about him too.
I hope you're still with us, but if you haven't heard all 30 of our episodes, this is a good way to pick and choose some things you might want to see
Absolutely.
and stuff like that. Really interesting guest that I think Hillary has gotten really close to in the past months as well, and she's doing amazing things that we really support.
Had her on twice.
Yeah, we did have her on twice.
Sandra Hannenbaum, journalist who actually like reached out to us and several people about a good way to go about curating Black media, discussed why there was a lack of Black media, has a really great like knowledge, understanding, and history about media, Black media, some good like practices around journalism and journalism as a Black person. And we had them on in an episode where I happened to be outside of an event. So I'm sitting outside during that episode, but we got to speak with Sandra for quite a long time about Twice as Good Media, 2xg.com, to learn more about their work and what they do. And yeah, a lot of the journalism that they try to do with Twice as Good Media is going back to those stories and figuring out what happened, not just throwing out headlines and then never circling back, being mindful of language around race. And I know what they're posting right now is around the Halifax National Black Summit that happened, which was why we had Sandra on a second time to talk about Emancipation Day and that event. And she's sort of doing a breakdown of all of those days in a more robust way if you sign up to that newsletter. So check them out, check out that episode. All good times.
There was also some really insightful parallels between her upbringing in both Maryland and Nova Scotia. And another thing I really like about her website is that she not only writes her own articles and shares and curates other articles from other websites, is that she spends a lot of time reading the articles. So for those of you who don't necessarily have the time to just sit down and read articles, you can go to 2xg.ca and you can listen to her articles and listen to other articles regarding the issues that we talk about. And it's nice. She's got a great journalistic voice. The way she reads is very calming. And I'm not going to say that she spearheaded this, but I'm starting to see more and more websites across the web where you can read or listen to the article. But her site was the first place I saw that. And I've listened to many articles because I can go about my day more easily. I could be cooking or cleaning or doing other work and still getting the news. So if that kind of thing interests you, go to 2xg.ca and subscribe to their mailing list. And then you will get a notification anytime. I don't know where I am.
That's okay.
Any time that she posts something new. And you can do the same thing on BlackLantic.ca. If you click the subscribe button, anytime we drop a new blog or a new podcast episode for season 2, you're going to get notified. All right.
So then
2 years without Floyd.
2 years since the murder of George Floyd. And we sort of just tried to discuss, like, are we at a better place? The news was so, at the time of his murder, there was so much work being done to amplify Black voices, to give Black people money, to share their experiences and their stories, and so many marches. And we tried to look back and see, like, okay, 2022 now, are we at a better place? Did any of that money go anywhere or do anything? I think our consensus was not really.
Yeah, if you want the full insight, go listen to the episode because we talked about it a lot. This is a monumental period in history, 2 years since the death of George Floyd. I wrote a blog about that as well, I believe. And so Hillary basically said it. Did a lot change, a bit changed. Things changed for the better in some areas, not really others, but for the details, go on to that. This episode was also the mark in the media of the whole monkeypox pandemic. Monkeypox has been around in Africa for years.
Hundreds.
And that didn't hit the news. But now that it started spreading to Western and European countries, now it's really important.
Except, and then
problematic.
Fast forward, and now it's primarily in the gay community, and that's having some connotations.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. So right now, if you wanted to get a smallpox vaccine, you have to be either queer, a man sleeping with a man, or a trans woman. And like, I was looking at doing it for, this is the first year hearing I'm going to New York Fashion Week. And we were looking at getting vaccinated because of that. And I don't qualify. And I was like, but I make out with women. Would you need me to prove it to you while I'm in line? Anyway, we're trying to figure that out. But we talked about that. And as Clinton accidentally segued to earlier, we did end up speaking about Justin Burke.
Basically, the Supreme Court of Canada kind of rewrote the Constitution in a way that is good and possibly bad, but it was because of the man that killed people in a mosque shooting. Basically, they decided that you cannot in Canada give a person more than one life sentence on top of each other, like back to back to back. So life sentence 25 years because you only got one life. And because that prohibits the possibility whatsoever of rehabilitation and introduction into society. So the Supreme Court had changed that, which means that New Brunswick cop killer Justin Burke, who, in his mind, he had a reason. He shouldn't have killed police officers, but in his mind, he thought he had a reason at the time because his friend was murdered by police officers, which happens in Black communities quite often. But yeah, so now he's going to be eligible for parole. That is obviously very painful and very triggering and problematic for the people whose lives he affected, and we sympathize with that. But also for Black people who have been handed multiple life sentences, this gives them the potential of rehabilitation and to at some point have some semblance of a life after 25 years. Doesn't mean that they will be released. It means that they're eligible for parole. So if they actually have been able to change their life in prison, they will have the opportunity to become part of society again, which is the silver lining in kind of a scenario like that.
Absolutely. And then we had Big Brother winner Tyshawn Carter Newman.
Probably our biggest celebrity of the season. Definitely our biggest celebrity
I
of the
think
season.
so. Yeah, very cool episode. A Big Brother fan, but had sort of like as Clinton
So if you
being
watch
I
Big
got
Brother,
on TV.
he was the winner of just to frame this. He was the winner, the first place winner of Big Brother season 9, which is a
Yep.
reality TV show in Canada.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Like I was getting there. I just want to explain that I don't have a TV, so I've been speeding so long. But yeah, my favorite reality show, he won. And I basically went to an event, met his manager, and was able to get him on the show. Definitely our most prolific person. But again, being Ontario based, we always want to link it to Nova Scotia. He's worked with Save Me, Save We, who we then more recently had on the show. So those two episodes are linked together. So if you want to learn about Save Me, Save We episode, we're going to get to that with Junior Moaku. But the episode that would precede that you should also listen to would be episode number 20 with Tasha.
Absolutely. And the one thing about him is that he has decided to use some of his celebrity status to talk about mental health advocacy and stuff like that to normalize and spread the word regarding
and was
that.
recently on Amazing Race Canada, but I think that they've
father.
already lost.
I haven't
seen him share any more episodes, and I was like, oh, are we done?
Well, it's hard to win, and so the fact that he won to begin with was a big deal.
He's also been very, very busy. He just spent like the summer in Paris. Like I follow his Instagram, and so he's been bebopping all around. But he does do a lot of mental health advocacy, so definitely check him out.
Absolutely. So for episode 21, we're 2/3 of the way through this. As you can see by the thumbnail, we were sitting here at this exact same table. So we always love to do in-person episodes together for obvious reasons whenever we can. And yeah, so while I was in Toronto visiting with my family back in June, we decided to do an episode of, the Toronto versus Moncton, aka rural life versus big city life episode, in which we talked about the pros and cons of living in a big city versus a small city, and we covered things like jobs, mental health, opportunity, whether you're a family or single, and stuff like that.
Do you say the cost? Because also living cost
of living, and the change in cost of living in rural areas like New Brunswick because of the pandemic and stuff like that.
If I remember correctly, episode was a quick one, so very easy to go back and listen to, and then give us your opinion as well, depending on where you're from.
Was it quick?
I thought it was only like 30 or 45.
I don't know, but certainly insightful. And the jury is never going to be completely out because different people have different needs at different points in their life. But certainly a really interesting episode if you are living in obviously you're either living in a city, rural area, or town.
If
if you're considering changing what you are doing with your life, definitely listen to this episode, especially if you're a person of color, to get some insights on the pros and cons of both kinds of lifestyles.
Or feel free to reach out to the two of us, because we've lived in both places.
Absolutely.
We've lived in lots of places.
Anyone who doesn't know, I'm a born and raised Toronto native, now living in New Brunswick, and Hillary was a born and raised New Brunswick native living in Toronto. So that's another reason I think we're able to bring a lot of interesting perspectives to the show. Not just this episode, but everything we do.
Yeah.
And check that one out.
And then another rapper, musician, who had some spicy takes about music New Brunswick.
Yeah, so Yonkers to New Brunswick. For episode 22, we were happy to interview Michael Earl, aka he now just goes by the rap name Fox. So I might update the website there.
Who's done some music with Clinton now. You can go and listen to my business partner, my friend, the person beside me, spitting some mad bars. And I just wasn't aware of your career before, so I was thoroughly impressed.
Anyone who knows me at all knows that I am not the guy that talks about myself too much in detail. I'm very much of a listener and a learner, and I like to give other people the opportunity to speak. Of course, I'm on a podcast and we speak here. But yeah, I've done a lot of really interesting things in my life. I was a rapper for a very long time. I put out a lot of music, a lot of cool things happening. But yeah, Mike here got me out of hiatus. I've been using that word a lot today. Yeah, so we dropped some new tracks. You can check that out on Spotify if you go find Fox, Foxx. But Fox had a lot of interesting perspectives as well between living in a city like New York City and New Brunswick. And he actually had a really positive outlook on it all, about the opportunities of living in Canada, how much funding there is available for arts and music, how it's a nicer place, people talk more, they're friendlier. and stuff like that. And I think he was talking about just a Canadian experience altogether. But he is a super dedicated artist who I think has put out close to 270 tracks in the past 3 years, has shot over 70 music videos, just released his probably best album to date called Still Fox on August 16th on his birthday. It's 16 or 17 tracks of really, really good quality music. Check out the episode to learn a little bit about him, and then go check out and follow him on streaming platforms as well.
Yeah.
Because he's a great individual doing a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, and collaborating with a lot of other amazing New Brunswickers too. 180, like so many people. The list is ever growing. So super cool. And I think there's a listening party.
Yeah, there was a listening party that I attended. It was great. If you want to be inspired, if you think your work ethic is lacking and you want to see what can be done in a day, listen to our episode with Fox. For episode 23, we talked about the Roe versus Wade decision, which really did shake people all around the world, as well as BIPOC people and the commissioner system. Here, I'll let you take this one.
No, so basically just how the overturning of Roe v. Wade directly impacts Black women and Black people, because white people statistically are more likely to have the money to get to places where there is abortion access. And in Canada, while something like that would probably never be overturned, it is already very limited. There's only one place where you can get an abortion in the Northwest Territories. People in rural areas have a very hard time. And that's why I do some of the work that I do with community health centers and getting that information out there and advocating for things like that. And then we also talked about Robert Tay Burrows stepping down from his position, assisting Manju Varma around her work as Commissioner of Systemic Racism, because he was able to highlight in an article with CBC that they were never going to be able to meet the needs of at least the Indigenous communities in the way that they suggested that they would, and also spilled some tea about like what Blaine Higgs was allowing to be expressed in the report and not. Again, things that we knew, things that we cited, things that we said on the previous podcast, things that we had said in the episode about Manju Varma saying that she didn't have time for complaints. So just more evidence that this report is going to be a sham. Yeah. That was the episode.
If you are interested, so again, reminder, follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe, all our streaming platforms, social media to get updates. We're dropping different kinds of content on our different social media channels, so it's never a bad idea to follow us everywhere. And but if you want to hear an episode, a very controversial episode, if that's your thing, make sure you listen to this episode.
And make sure to subscribe, just because like the minute that report's out, y'all know I'm doing an in-depth play-by-play live reading of each page and why is this probably BS. So I just expect that for season 2, if the report ever gets released.
Touche. Imagine it didn't.
I imagine Manju steps down next. If that happens, you heard it here first. What did you premonition? There was something that you said, and there's been several instances where you're like, I'm the one who said this would happen. I think it was around the commission. Was it around that topic?
I don't know. I have prophesied, and it's all documented. I've prophesied many things in the past that have come to fruition. And the one we talked about this week was Trump and his social media network that everyone thought was going to tank. And I was like, nah, this is going to take off. He's getting banned from all these other things. People are going to leave those, and all his supporters are going to go over there where he's going to be able to keep spitting his rhetoric. So why ban him from Twitter to begin with? He's just going to create.
We were trying to find out what I think what web place would be willing to hold his app or whatever. But anyway,
there's always going to be one.
It's thriving.
Money, right? Oh, nipple shot.
It's his, not mine, so I guess we're still good to roll.
Yeah, we're good. This YouTube will probably not restrict this video.
No, but it sure had a problem with the photo we had with Alicia McManus.
The photo we chose for Alicia McManus got banned by YouTube. We had to change it. Funny, interesting tidbit of information there. I'll let you take this one as well.
Sure. That we had on for our 22nd, 23rd, 24th episode. Olam Kowo, friend of mine who I've known for several years, who, while I was home and we had recorded some of those in-person episodes, explained to me that they were doing a multicultural market every last Saturday.
Once a month?
Once a month. At the Lions Club on Mark Street. And so we were able to talk to him about his experience of being Black and going to Moncton High and McNaughton, his relationship with his dad, different endeavors that he's done, what his life has been like, and why this market was important, and some of the work that he had done, being a Black Lives Matter activist and helping with some of the demonstration marches.
He helped organize the Black Lives Matter
Yes.
marches, the two
Yeah.
ones that took place in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Yeah, some of that work.
Bro's he's a young man and he's had a really interesting life. It's really interesting to hear his stories from living in like South America and traveling and everything like that. But yeah, like
Yeah.
he's one of the people that made the Black Lives Matter marches in Moncton take place. So he deserves to be
Yeah.
to listen to as well, and especially followed on what he's doing nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Took a cab all the way to one of the marches outside of town on his birthday.
That's commitment.
Real
Yeah, he went down to
dedication.
Fredericton to attend a march on his birthday.
Yes.
And yeah, props to him.
Absolutely.
Major kudos. All right.
Another episode with someone that we ended up having on twice.
Yep.
We talked about Justin Trudeau apologizing for the racism that occurred to the number 2 battalion way back in war times. I never know.
I believe it's World
War
War
II?
I don't know.
I don't know.
World War
One. But some of the people in that battalion are ancestors of and related to Jennifer Dow. Jennifer being related to Mary Louise and Tondway McCarthy, who we reference often as Black historians and people in the community doing great work. So she was able to come on and educate both of us and enlighten both of us on the importance of the battalion, the importance of the apology, but also the fact that it was very Nova Scotian focused, and some of maybe why some New Brunswickers felt there should have been a little bit more to the apology, highlighting all of the Black soldiers' work. And you had also gone to a comedy show that was
so global Brampton born Canadian based comedic superstar Russell Peters did a show in Moncton, which was really funny. I've always been a fan of him for decades. This show was slightly problematic, not so much as in the Dave Chappelle way, but he was saying some things that probably don't fly very well in 2022. Of course, that's a whole other episode, which I think we talked about in the Dave Chappelle episode about comedy. But Russell Peters is from Toronto, a merely multicultural city. He always loves to bring up the fact that he grew up around a bunch of Black people, which I guess gives him, in his mind, the allowance to say the N-word. So in Moncton, New Brunswick, during the show of like 99% white people, he was making a bunch of jokes in which he dropped the N-bomb. And it wasn't that funny. I don't even think the crowd thought it was very funny. I think he saw the crowd's reaction because he made a face and he started talking about, if you're offended, fuck you, blah, 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 blah. And the episode was just about like, can an East Indian person drop the N-word? Now, being back in Toronto for the past 5 days and meeting up with some of my old friends, I actually talked to one of them about it. And I did realize that in Toronto, a lot of people use the N-word among all cultures. Black culture, Black music, it has been exported around the world, but even more so in Toronto. In Toronto, you have people of all kinds of cultures that have adopted this hip hop mentality. And while I still don't agree that, I don't think he should have said it, being from Toronto, maybe he doesn't understand the demographics of the rest of Canada and how backwards and behind and racist they really are. And it was shocking and controversial. I think a lot of people use that word here in Toronto, to be honest with you. Not in a hateful way, but in a pretty place like New Brunswick, it's
not good. He is doing a free street performance for Just for Laughs Comedy Fest. And so I will go, since it's free, just to see if he makes the same joke. So we will have Hillary as a correspondent on scene for Russell Peters comedy thing, just to see if he does it again and if it goes better here, because it might.
I will tell you one thing. I know that this episode, like many, I know he's recording for Netflix, and I want to see if that joke makes it to the Netflix version. And I highly doubt it will, unless the people at Netflix are really obsessed with controversy and they know that allowing controversy.
They let Dave do Dave's thing.
Exactly. So we're gonna learn about who the people at Netflix really are if they let an East Indian Russell Peters say the word nigger on a Netflix. We say that word all the time, or sometimes. I go back and forth between N-word, and you have said it on the show a few times as well, and controversy as well. We're allowed to. Although many Black people think that the word should be erased from the English language. No one should say it. Black people shouldn't say it. And again, Black
Absolutely.
people are allowed to have a million different opinions. And Hillary doesn't like it at all.
I've said it maybe in like context, and I've jokingly said it, but like my main feeling would be let's not ever say it again.
Yep, I
Yeah.
definitely say it a lot less in my older years. Of course, we also have talked about the fact that it is very popular. Oh, you had suggested, okay. I might write about this in a future blog. So I'm gonna stop talking about it. You know,
Oh
you know what I'm
yeah,
talking about.
the thing
The,
on
the thing about the stuff.
the thing about the stuff and the thing.
Yeah.
The next guest that we have is the other photographer who I
Oh,
was
another great.
referencing.
All our guests are great, but
Yeah.
just some episodes they're just nice warm feeling, right? And,
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So Robin Gessi Gislain from Rwanda, our first Rwandan guest. We had to learn a lot about that country.
Really interesting.
A young man doing a lot and has partnered with the Canon Futures Project. So he's being featured by Canon, sponsored by them, has been able to come to Toronto for some photography workshops and stuff since our episode. Just an all-around like amazing, great guy with some great stories. And like I said, would be amazing if listeners listen to the Gary episode and then this episode to see how like two Black men from two different places do the same medium in completely different ways and are inspired by such different things. But lovely, soft-spoken, perfect podcast voice. Great guy.
Yeah, if you are a visual person, this was probably one of our most visually interesting episodes on YouTube because he just took over the screen and he showed us a bunch of his beautiful photography as well as explanations behind his inspirations and why he did things the way he did.
Yeah.
If you are someone that watches us on YouTube and you haven't seen that episode, go back. You will really enjoy that one.
Yeah.
So
I didn't realize that you had the title of this episode was the title of this episode on the website. Because it's not the same as YouTube. And it's really funny.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
I like this is one of my favorite. Yeah, it's short and sweet. And actually I did that because it was showing up as too long on the website. But yeah, that's more eye-catching, isn't it?
It's good.
Sesame Street should hire people from Sudbury.
Because Sesame Street and Sudbury are racist.
If you hadn't heard about it, Sesame Street, it came under fire recently because videos surfaced from multiple different parades and events around the city of Sesame Street characters being incredibly disrespectful and racist to Black people. And if you think that we are inaccurate or exaggerating or misunderstanding or like didn't see things correctly, watch the episode because we play all the clips. Watch them a few times because it would be really hard for anyone to watch the video clips, 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them, and be like, there's nothing here. Different actors probably, or maybe the same actors in different in costumes in different cities and different events being really disrespectful to Black kids.
Absolutely.
So
and then,
also in Sudbury.
Yeah, no, also in Sudbury, a young Black girl was trying to defend someone who was working, and basically this guy was being super racist and yelling and calling her the N-word, and then made the stipulation of like the difference between being Black and being an N-word, which we had a big discussion about that. And then in a similar, something that happened in a similar context that we know of in New Brunswick was that the girl was told that if she were to press charges would also be laid against her.
A young boy.
Yeah.
For being harassed racially.
I meant the her in Sudbury.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Same situation.
There was also a gentleman who was advocating for the fact that the English proficiency tests coming out of primarily English-speaking African countries were unfair. People from English-speaking countries outside of Africa did not have to pass an English proficiency test to be able to come to Canadian English universities. However, I believe is it Nigeria? In Nigeria, a country that is English first, kindergarten, all the way up to high school, and on their universities are all in English. Nigerians have to pay to take an English proficiency test to come to a Canadian university. So that was in the news that this gentleman was speaking out about that and trying to get that changed. Some of the PEI universities and hopefully other ones are looking into that. But it's a form of racism. If you're an English-speaking African country, why would you have to take an English test?
It's a form of racism, but it's also just like, why aren't you looking up what language African countries speak?
Yes.
Like maybe you should figure out that they do speak English there.
It's another one of those do better things.
Yeah.
And again, when the Pope came to visit, another Justin Trudeau snub, when the Pope came to visit in Canada, we have some video clips of Indigenous leaders just completely dissing Justin Trudeau. It's pretty funny.
Just ignoring him, not shaking his hand, and like, same.
Yeah.
I would too.
Well, we're getting into recent news here.
Yeah.
All right. So as mentioned, episode 28 was about Junior Nwako,
Waku.
who was the founder of the Save Me, Save We Foundation in
Mhm.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's also lived in many different places in North
So
America.
many
Very interesting.
places
And
because of pro
we heard of
basketball.
him through Tash.
Ferron.
I wanted to make sure I was saying his name right.
Yep.
You want to talk a little bit about the interview there?
Yeah, so yeah, because of Tyshawn basically using some of his mental health advocacy to speak with Junior in Nova Scotia. Junior outlined how through traveling and basketball, he realized that a lot of people just had poor mental health. It wasn't even about advocacy as much as it was about a learning and understanding and education. Started by making a shirt that said "Save Me," which sparked a lot of conversation, and that steamrolled into a whole clothing line. But that's also partnered it with schools and different organizations to allow for that education piece and to be speaking to people about what mental health looks like, what good mental health looks like, how you practice mental health, and how to have everyone to get everyone a better understanding of what good mental health looks like in terms of self-care and all other things. It was a great episode.
It was a really heartwarming episode. He's also was an actor, model, former pro athlete.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the story of what happened the first time he wore a shirt that said "Save Me." I won't. You should listen to the episode.
Listen to the episode.
And
And also some good highlights about like toxic masculinity and like male mental health, which I think gets overlooked a lot. So very important episode.
especially in Black communities, more so than ever. A stigma that is changing, thankfully, but yeah, definitely gets overlooked in a major way. So that was a really insightful episode.
Yeah,
that you should listen to. Recently, oh, we're almost caught
we're almost
up.
caught up.
This was our first round table. It was episode 29 of season 1, and it was centered around August 1st, which was
Emancipation Day.
first ever federally recognized Emancipation Day in which we weren't in a pandemic where there were restrictions. So we had a number of guests on the show to recap all the different Emancipation Day events that we attended. We asked our guests what they attended, how it made them feel, why they think Emancipation Day is important. And honestly, I knew it was going to be insightful, but it was really insightful. The feedback and takeaway I took from this episode was mind-boggling and really good to listen to.
I really appreciated hearing like how everybody set up their events. So not only do we have people who participated in events, we had people who had helped like actually organize their events and what it meant to them and what was meaningful. So Sandra Handenbaum and Jennifer Dow, who had already been on the show, I've referenced before, Mamadou Diallo and Matthew Martin. So Matthew, who does BLM New Brunswick, visited Mamadou's event, but then also held one in St. John. So gave you a little bit of a spiel of all over the place. And then you went to an event in Amherst and I emceed one in Whitby. So we tried to cover half of the country in this roundtable, but I expected it to be maybe more overwhelming to produce. And it was honestly so much fun. And then another one of those episodes where we stayed on and talked afterwards for so long. And it was so good to just connect with other Black people in the community virtually. And it is something we want to continue to do.
It's really too bad we hit the stop button on the recording of this episode because afterwards we all stayed on and we talked for another half hour to 40 minutes, and that would have been an episode in itself, which might be a future episode, so I won't tell you what it was about.
Yeah, they gave us episode ideas, so we will thank them for those, and we will be producing them, which is always very helpful.
Should we take a breath here?
We can take a breath because I know what episode's next. It's our most recent episode.
Yeah. You can actually, we don't have to take a real breath, but here we are, 30 episodes in. And
it's our biggest episode.
Yeah.
The Ferron Family Farms episode has between part 1 and part 2 on YouTube for over 400 views.
Oh, like 600.
Probably. The support that this family has of their community of people from probably Scarborough, Jamaica, Ontario, all over the place is massive. The things that we heard in that episode, I think, were insightful and enlightening and heartwarming and simultaneously devastating. And I've been able to speak with Karen, after the fact about how like it's so hard, but it's so important to continue to push forward so that there can be other Black farmers in New Brunswick. Because the shtick of the episode is they are the only Black farmers that we're aware of in the entire province, and they're doing amazing work. And they've got the only real authentic goat in the whole province. So if you're looking for goat, go there. Go find the Ferron Family Farms.
If you're watching us on YouTube even today, I mean, look at this beautiful family, like first generation Jamaican immigrants, who I believe moved here pretty youngish, respectively, who lived in different places in Canada. And during the pandemic, you know, the father always had a dream of having a farm, moved to New Brunswick, Centerville, middle of nowhere, to a 137-acre farm in which they have goats and chickens, sheep, I believe, horses and cows, and they are doing it. They're making their sustainable, fresh meats with no hormones and organics. And their story of just struggle and resilience and trying to find support in the community, and racism at their schools, but their passion to fight through it, and the way the mom was not taking it, and how she fought the schools to make sure that kids that were racially abusing her children were held accountable and stuff like that. Like, this episode has it all. This family is beautiful. This was our easiest episode to record.
We barely spoke.
They could have their own podcast, I think, because they just answered all our questions without us asking them.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a real story of resilience in New Brunswick. People moving to a place that had not Moncton or St. John, that had literally never seen Black people in communities that they'd never even been to Moncton or a town.
Yeah.
They'd never seen melanin. A really eye-opening episode. Thankfully, our biggest episode of the season, before our send-off. And if you only started listening during this episode, please go back, because I don't think there's one best episode that we did, but this was a really great one.
It was a really great one. And I think that all of our guests have really shown the resiliency of what it's like to be Black people in minority settings. The East Coast ones, especially, with a lot of the racism that they're facing, I think, and like a lack of big overarching community, but how they're all creating that community space for themselves is, I think, what the overarching thing has been, that these, I don't know, 15 episodes worth of guests, but like 20 different guests have really highlighted for us. Everyone's working really, really hard for the thing that they care about. And all we seem to really care about collectively is moving that needle forward, making safer spaces for ourselves, having a sense of community. And I'm very proud of all the work that we've done to highlight all the work that they've done.
Yeah. So that's it, everyone. Season 1. This has been really interesting for us to do a recap of all the amazing things we've learned, amazing guests we've had, amazing topic, not amazing, engaging topics we've covered over the past 7 months. It's amazing that we've been doing this 7 months. As you can imagine, putting together a weekly podcast is a lot of work. We release video, audio versions on multiple streaming sites while maintaining a website and keeping our social media channels up to date.
While also living our lives.
Yeah, this is by no means our full-time job, and there's no source of revenue. There's no revenue coming. We do this for the passion. We both feel very passionate about sharing unheard stories. In the Atlantic provinces, you know, people of color, especially Black people and all people of color, do not get a voice in the media. They do not get to be heard unless it's a story of horrible, violent crimes that had happened, or maybe just a little fluff piece about someone doing a business, which is important, but it's not the stories. You just hear the story of what the person is doing. You don't hear the backstory of the trials and tribulations. Another reason Hillary and I do this is because we want to expose to people who may not have been exposed to Black culture. That Black people can't be put into any sort of one category or box, that we're all different, we have different political views, different views on the, and like there's different views on anything. We might have different views on politics, sports. We definitely have different views, and a lot of similar views. One thing we like to repeat is, you know, Black people are as diverse as they come from countries all over the world. We come to North America and we're called Black, but in these other countries, Black people don't necessarily think of themselves as Black. They think of themselves as the country they are from. Nigerian, Somalian, Dominican, stuff like that. Just like a white person might think of themselves as Finnish or Swedish, or I'm not going to call Italian people white, but Danish and stuff like that. That's the jury's out on that for sure. But we're as diverse as they come. And you look like you're in deep thought right now. We're as diverse as they come, and we want to expose that. We are taking a 6-week break we're so proud of all the work we've done. And we're taking a little break to come back bigger and better and stronger and just on a whole other level. I hope you've enjoyed this recap.
Thank you if you're still here, because we have no concept of how long this episode's been, and I think it maybe is close to like an hour and a half now. So thank you if you've stuck around this long. Thank you if you've watched any of the episodes before. Thank you if you go back and listen to any of them, and if you don't, that's fine. We'll see you in 6 weeks with new content.
We ain't hating. We're still going to be around. You're still going to see us posting the content online, recaps of seasons, teasers, and stuff like that. Hillary on TikTok is slaying it, killing it, and stuff like that. But we hope you've enjoyed this recap. We hope you take the time to look through our content on our website and, show support, like, comment, follow us. Help us get the word out. Sharing is the number one thing.
And if you've made it to the end and you want to help us with what we're doing, we are looking for a contributor or a volunteer, or essentially, do you want to help us make it? Do you want to help us find content? Do you want to write? We're open to ideas. We're open to people.
Yep, and
shoot us an email.
Also on our blogs, there's a buy us a coffee option if you want to fund what we're doing. Obviously, this stuff isn't free for us. We don't make any money for it, but we have a GoFundMe if you want to support that way as well.
And thank you to everyone who's contributed so far.
Thank you so much to our contributors. None of that money goes into our own pockets. It all goes to work towards the website and the costs affiliated with recording and producing and hosting the website and stuff like that. A bit of marketing on social media and stuff like that. Well, I think that is it from my close friend and business partner, Hillary LeBlanc. Here in Toronto. We're going back to New Brunswick tomorrow, my wife and I. And we hope you've enjoyed this.
Yeah. 30 plus 30 hours, 30 over what words? Over 30 hours of content summarized in this hour and a half is what I was trying to say. Anyway, bye.